So we had a good payday. We decided to invest in our favorite new card game, Flesh and Blood, and we want to spend some money on cards that will help us improve our Uzuri deck. So I will only be talking about the cards I added, which are a few big ones, and I'll try to get through them quite quickly, so we can get through all of these decks. So first, let's talk about Mask of Perdition. It's one of the cards I would try and buy quite quickly because it's just a better Iron Rod helm. I'm not sure about the price. I think it's like €5 or $5. But there's two nice upgrades. First off, you can recur it. So if it gets destroyed, you can buy it back with 2 silvers. Which how to get those silvers I will show you. And it has an extra effect. So it just does more than Iron Rod for $5. A nice upgrade. Secondly, I would buy a Nerf Scalpel. Generally, Uzuris play Spider's Bite and Nerf Scalpel. They don't play 2 Spider's Bites, but to keep it very budget, we excluded the Nerf Scalpel. It's not that expensive, and what's nice about Nerf Scalpel is that it does the -1 on defense reactions. Generally, it's not that interesting to have 2 Spider's Bites effects, -1ing a card twice, which can be nice, arguably, but the Nerf Scalpel doing the -1 on defense reactions has more of a wide application into a broader stroke of decks. And the last dagger that we want to add is the Orbitoclast. It's not needed. It depends on the meta you're playing in. If you're seeing a lot of decks that use non-attack actions, so let's say Rune Blades, Wizards, use a lot of non-attack actions that they also might want to block with, Orbitoclast can be a nice way to improve your matchup into those decks. Let's jump into the most important upgrades for the deck, making it a lot stronger. First up, Leave No Witnesses. Fantastic card, brilliant art. It is a contract and a way to generate silver, and it is a pseudo Command and Conquer. Command and Conquer is one of the quintessential cards in Flesh and Blood, and what makes it strong is that if it hits, you get to destroy their arsenal, forcing them to block with 2 cards. And Leave No Witnesses does the same thing. It doesn't cost a resource, and when it hits, you banish the top card of their deck and 1 card in their arsenal. It has 4 attack, meaning that they generally have to block it with 2 cards, and if you have a Spider's Bite or you stack the Spider's Bites, although that's not really that good, it can be a very annoying card to block. And it's one of the best 1-card hands that you can have. Uzuri as a game plan revolves around value hands, so generating a lot of, just keeping the game in check with cards like Leave No Witnesses. Just very important card, and you also get the silver so you can buy back the Mask of Perdition if you want to. Must buy. I might actually buy this first because it's such a strong card as an Uzuri. But there's one card that's in contention for being as strong as the Leave No Witness, and that's the Uzuri specialization Shakedown. So Shakedown is also a swap target. It's a payoff card. You see we took out the Humble for the Shakedown. And what makes it so strong is that the effect. So when this hits a hero, choose red, yellow, or blue, they reveal their hand, banish a card of the chosen color. So not only are you doing probably 3 damage, because you do this often, Isolate for example, you will also be taking one of their cards. So technically you took 2 cards because they defended with 1 card, and then you swapped in this card and banish 1 as well. Meaning that you control their turn a lot, and you probably take the tempo from them because you've got 2 cards out of their hand. Very important card. If I was to play Uzuri, I would have a really hard time between the Leave No Witnesses and Shakedown. I would probably go for the Leave No Witnesses, but going for the Shakedown makes as much sense. And if you want to treat yourself to really good cards, I would buy those two. The last one that we're adding, you see there's not a lot of upgrades, but they're, in my opinion, one of the stronger cards in the deck. The last one is Surgical Extraction. Surgical Extraction is about the same as Leave No Witnesses. There's a few differences. It is also a contract, so it's also a way to get the silver token to buy back the mask. But when this hits, you get to look at their hand and banish a card, the same as Shakedown. Instead, you don't have to choose a color for the card. And this is a blue, it blocks for 3, it attacks for 4. The only downside is that it costs 2 instead of 0 for the Leave No Witnesses. So this is probably a card I would buy after the other two. But it's very much a card that also generates a lot of tempo because you want to also block this with 2 cards. It's just more of the upfront instead of the sneakiness from Shakedown. So those are the first upgrades I would make, and now we can make 2 decisions. We can either go into a equipment upgrade or a deck upgrade. So let's start off with the deck upgrade. So as you can see, we still have the same equipments that we got from the first upgrade of the deck, but we're adding a lot of strong cards into the main deck, which you will be feeling every single game. First off, I am adding the Enlightened Strike. It's a staple. It's a very, very strong card. It's very flexible. It's probably one of my favorite cards in Flesh and Blood. Although I do have quite a few favorite cards, but this was one of the first staples I got, and every time I see it, I'm just very happy I have it, because it doesn't matter which mode you choose, the draw a card, the +2, or the go again. It is applicable in most situations. And Uzuri generally wants to play off 1 or 2 card hands, and E-Strike is arguably one of the best 2 card hands in the entire game. Why? Because you can either go for the draw card. So let's say we have a very bad card we don't want in the arsenal, and we have an E-Strike. We can play the E-Strike, cycle the card, so we put it on the bottom, draw a new card, and that's the card we want to arsenal, and we're still attacking for 5, which is just a free sink below effect, basically. Let's say we have a card in arsenal and we defended our opponent's turn and we just want to push some damage. We can go for the +2, so just attacking for 7, putting 1 card on the bottom. And the last one, if we have 5 cards in our hand, maybe we have the 4 cards in our hand, maybe we have the E-Strike in the arsenal, we have 3 blues, a nice payoff card, we can go for the E-Strike, Enlightened Strike, put a card on the bottom, and choose to go again, forcing the opponent to either take the 5 damage and being able to block out what's coming next, or they have to use 1 or 2 cards to block out the Enlightened Strike, ensuring us that the next cards we play will be harder for them to block. So it's a really nice upgrade. It is quite expensive, but you can play it in most decks that you want to. You can even add it. I play it in Lexi, for example. I tried it in Lexi. It's nice in Lexi. I play it in Icelander. People play it in Fi. There's loads of decks that can use a Enlightened Strike. So perfect card to pick up. Next up is Give and Take. Give and Take is a way to attack for 3. It has go again. I don't think it's that expensive, and it sets you up for a upgrade down the line. It's not necessarily needed, but it's just a way to include some more go again into the deck. The effect doesn't affect any of the cards we play at this moment, but in the endgame build it does matter. I'm not sure if there's a lot of other cards that I would play in the spot of Give and Take, because we still have the Ravenous Rebel, we still have the Looking for Scrap, and we still have the Hurl. If you don't want to spend money on the Give and Take now because you don't see the value of just having a 3 go again, you can probably still play the Dead Touches, for example. And that's the upgrades we did. It's basically just the E-Strike that we added into the deck, which does come at a price. But trust me, it's definitely worth it. If we're not going to the route of buying the Enlightened Strikes and maybe the give and takes, but we want to upgrade the equipment, which we have with us all the time, I would look at these equipments. As you can see, this is about a $90 upgrade. This is a $100 upgrade. And we get some really nice equipments. Being the Crown of Providence, which is a bulk of the money. And the flick knives. So Crown of Providence is the quintessential generic helmet in Flesh and Blood. Most decks run it. It's very nice, and why we can make this upgrade quite cheaply is because they reprinted it recently in a non-foil version, meaning that it's now only 70 to 80 euros. I'm not sure what they are in dollars, but it's a great pickup if you want to upgrade your deck, and you can play it in pretty much every single deck you want to, except for Rangers, where they use the head slot for other things. There's times Icelander played it, so it's a very good upgrade for your entire Flesh and Blood collection. And the second one, flick knives. It's an assassin ninja arms. It's a legendary, but it's not very expensive. What's nice about flick knives is two things. You generally use it to block because there's one block value, but you can also use the attack action, or you can use the attack reaction to kill an opponent. So it says once per turn attack reaction, target dagger you control that isn't on the active chain link deals 1 damage to target hero. If damage is dealt this way, the dagger has hit, destroy the dagger. If an opponent goes to 1 and they don't have a way to prevent damage, this just kills them. As simple as that. You generally don't get to kill people with flick knives because you will have used it to block a breakpoint. But do note, it's just a very nice way to end the game. It also has the block. You can also do the attack reaction and still block with it. So it's just a really nice upgrade for the for your deck. It does mean that you won't be running any of the you won't be having the E-strikes, but you will be playing with the familiar cards you have. And if we add both of the upgrades together, we get something like this, which is starting to look like quite the deck, if I'm being honest. It comes out at about $290, and you have most of the strong equipments. You have a lot of the nice attack, the nice value cards like Leave No Witness, like Shakedown, especially the E-strike. It's such a good card. And that, don't forget, if you don't want to splurge from the give and take, which is fine, you use it to get back a Codex of Frailty, ideally. You can just run the yellow Dead Touches, for example. Let's go upgrade to the next step, which is rounding out the equipment. This one, it's not the most fun step. It is one of the most expensive cards in the whole of Flesh and Blood. It is also the most played card in Flesh and Blood, and the only upgrade we're doing from this step to this step is the Fyendal Spring Tunic. So we get to retire the Blossom of Spring and get the insane value that Spring Tunic generates. I would get this as soon as I could, because you can play it in every single deck in the entirety of Flesh and Blood, because the one resource is really nice. There are a few decks that don't, so Fi can play something else, Katsu can play something else. If you're a very explosive deck, you can play something else. But if you're going for a semi-long game plan, Spring Tunic generates so much value over time. That's just really nice. I do feel personally that you don't need it as an Uzuri. But it is really nice to have it, to have the extra resource, so you can go dagger, dagger, stealth with 1 blue instead of 2 blues, or 1 blue and a red, which is a nice way to use the extra resource from tunic. And yeah, I do think that most of the cards that you play are, well, you can go like you have the death touch and arsenal, you can tunic for death touch, which is a nice play as well. But generally you are looking for the 0 into a swap, or pitching blues into daggers. It is also nice to have the tunic for looking for scrap, to be honest. Which, yeah, you're upgrading 1 card. It's one of the most, well, it is in my opinion the most staple card in the entirety of Flesh and Blood, which does feel nice to have, but you can also look at upgrading the deck. That one's also going to be expensive. Why? Because we're adding 2 of the most expensive cards in right now in the deck part. We're adding the Command and Conquers, quintessential Flesh and Blood card, in the same category as the Enlightened Strikes and Final Spring Tunic, which we don't have in this deck yet. But it does the same as the Leave No Witnesses, only defense reactions cannot be played to it. And it says destroy all cards in their arsenal. So if you're up against a ranger, you will destroy both instead of just 1, which you will do with the Leave No Witness. And it blocks for 3. It's just a very, very, very good card, which is why it's very, very, very expensive. And we add one of the most annoying cards in the opinions of a lot of people, is Codex of Frailty. If you're ever in a spending mood and you want to skip a few parts of the steps, you want to skip the equipment or something, one of the cards I would get if you really want to splurge is this card, Codex of Frailty. It allows you to have 6 of a card. Generally you get back the Leave No Witnesses. But first let me explain the card. Each hero puts an attack action card from their graveyard face down into their arsenal. Each hero that does discards a card, and it creates a ponder token under your control and a frailty token under your opponent's control. So at first glance it doesn't look as strong because you have to discard a card, but generally you play the Codex of Frailty when you have no cards in hand, or you try to play it at the point where you don't have cards in hand. And if you do, you still get the effect from getting a card from the graveyard face down into your arsenal, but you don't get the discard. And if your opponent doesn't have an arsenal at that point, they will have to discard, because they have to put a card from their graveyard face down into their arsenal. So it's a very good way to take 1 card already from your opponent with the discard, if they don't have an arsenal, if they don't play around the Codex of Frailty, and then you still get to attack with the Leave No Witnesses, which also attacks the card that they put into the graveyard or into the arsenal, which makes these 2 a very potent combination of cards. The only downside is this is about 40 euros. I'm not sure about the dollars, but it is such a good card. The only reason I didn't include it earlier is because it has a 40 euro or dollar price tag. You can play the deck without it, but with Codex of Frailty the decks just becomes so much stronger, so much more unfair to play against, that if you're going to splurge and if you have the decision between getting a playset of Command and Conquers and a playset of Codex of Frailties, I would recommend the Codex of Frailties over the Command and Conquers, although the Command and Conquers you can play in every deck. The Codex of Frailties will boost your Uzuri deck a lot more. And the second reason why is because not only will you have 6 Leave No Witnesses, but with the give and takes you potentially also have 6 Codex of Frailties. If they block, you get to put a card with attack less than give and takes attack value on top of your deck, and the only action that you can put on top of your deck is the Codex of Frailty. So generally people won't block the give and take, which means it's just 3 free damage. or you get the codex back. It's such a good card, and that about rounding out the deck part. So Codex of Frailty, Command and Conquer. I would buy the Codex of Frailty first, but if you also play other decks, you might want to get the Command and Conquers first. And if we put everything together, we get a list looking something like this. It's a little bit more than $900. It's $950. I did make some upgrades. We have the standard equipment suite. We have all the strong cards: Command and Conquers, the East Strikes, Give and Takes, Codex, Shakedown, Leave No Witness, Surgical Extraction. We still have some of the cards that you've been playing with the entire time. So the Looking for Scrap, the Hurls, all the stealth cards, the Shreds. This generally the cards supporting the swap get upgraded, and this is what a deck will look like. I do have to note the meta switches. I've seen decks where they run less surgical extractions. You see decks that still run the red shreds. So there's a lot of ways the decks can change. So if you're at this point, this is generally what a Uzuri endgame deck can look like. But if you want to be sure and you start the process of upgrading the deck, do check out some of the deck lists from recent tournaments where they might have swapped off, let's say, East Strikes or Command and Conquers. I cannot think of a reason why, but before you're going to spend like $150 on Command and Conquers, do check if they're still being run. It would suck if you're buying these to upgrade the deck and they're not played anymore. I still have some cards to talk about to close out the entire upgrade chain. These are some cards that are being played, that you can play, that have seen play, that I did not include into the deck. I do not have a sideboard at this point, because you can add a few of these cards as you wish. A card that's being run a lot right now, well, a lot that they use in sideboards, is Amnesia. When this hits, a hero, cards and tokens they own lose and can't gain names until the start of your next turn. It can be strong against Katsu, against Prism, where card names are relevant for the opponent, so it can be a good swappable target. We have Down and Dirty. It's a way to defend against... it's 6 attack, and when you're playing against illusionists, so Prism and Dromai at this point, most of the cards have Phantasm, and Phantasm means that if you block the card with a card with 6 or more attack, you destroy the attack. And Down and Dirty is a way to pop, which is what blocking a Phantasm attack is called, to do it from Arsenal. And you can get the Down and Dirty back with the Codex of Frailty. So you do see a few Uzuris running the Down and Dirty for the Dromai matchup specifically. Or, well, if Prism gets a lot of play, you might want to play it as a popper against Prism as well. It's not needed. It is nice though. Fate Foreseen, we've talked about it. Frailty Trap as well. Humble, we've talked about it. Nourishing Emptiness, I've seen a few lists play it. It's a card that it just attacks for 6, which is nice. And if you can pull it off the first time, well, there are no attack action cards in your graveyard. You get Dominate, nice, and you get 1 intelligence, which this and one other card give you intelligence. If I recall, meaning that you get a 5-card hand instead of a 4-card hand. Can be nice. I'm not entirely sure if it's still being run a lot. It's something to think about, and the art is amazing, and getting the +1 intelligence does feel big brain. You still can play the Death Touches in yellow, totally fine. Raging Onslaught is a card that Uzuri's used to pop. It's a yellow instead of a red, a yellow 6, meaning that you can also pay a dagger. You can also attack with a dagger using the Raging Onslaught to pay. which is nice. It's just for the Dromai matchup, or well, the Illusionist matchup. And the last one is a Black Tech Whisperers. It's the boots. It's the same as the Mask of Perdition. You can, it has Battle Worn. You can buy it back with silvers. So if you're going to run this, you might want to run some more contracts than in this list. Notably, let's see, where do we have it? I think we have it in this. Notably, the Plunder the Poor, so you can get back the Black Tax and the Mask of Perdition. It's a slight upgrade. Well, it can be an upgrade for Snapdragons. You do see Uzuri's running Snapdragons. You also see Uzuri's running Black Tax. Why Black Tax over? You can run either or. You might even run both. If you're at this point, you might even know more about Uzuri than I do. If you're at this point of upgrading the deck. What's nice about Black Tech is that it has the Battle Worn, meaning that you can block with it and still have the attack reaction part of the card, which means that you can give a assassin attack action card go again, and you can buy it back. So it is very nice, but you do need to give a attack action, an assassin attack action go again, and let's say you cannot use it on E-Strike. That's about it. If you want to splouch, just buy it. If you don't want to buy it, I think Snapdragons are also really nice. You're just missing the one block from the Black Techs. And we still have the No Rune and Orbital Clask. If you want to run them in your current meta, you can. You see Uzuri is probably tagged against what they're expecting to play against. You have a lot of options to do so, and if you're at this part of the deck, you've upgraded most of these cards, you will have a grasp of your local meta and the ways you can target them. So, Temper. Quintessential Flesh and Blood card. In my opinion, the most staple card in the entirety of Flesh and Blood. The quintessential generic helmet in Flesh and Blood. It's a staple. Command and Conquer is one of the quintessential cards in Flesh and Blood.